Aurora founder Ebenezer Sheldon's deed house was carefully moved from its longtime home on the Spring Hill property on Pioneer Trail 3 miles down the street to its new location on Pioneer Park Triangle across from the Memorial Library.
I was so excited I can hardly describe it, because frankly it was something that I was hoping for the city of Aurora to accomplish a long time ago. Not specifically the deed house, but to find ways to enhance the history of our wonderful city. Some of it, I think, was really brought home to me when in 1999 Aurora celebrated its 200th anniversary, and our then Governor Taft came and marched with me in our July 4th parade celebration. And I realized what an incredible history this town had, and we needed to do more with it. So in my mind, I've been thinking about that kind of thing for a long time. Once the city determined where we wanted to move the deed house, and we're here on what we're calling right now Pioneer Park or Pioneer Triangle. This property is owned by the city. Once we made that determination, then we looked at how we could actually work with the Historical Society on the restoration of the deed house. The city has paid for the move. The city has paid for the foundation. The city will also pay for the restoration of the exterior of the building. The city owns the building. However, we've entered into a lease agreement with the Historical Society, and among other things, they will be handling the interior renovation over the next year or so.
The Ebenezer Sheldon Deed House is the oldest commercial building in Aurora. It's not the oldest structure per se, because there is a residence, the 1815 house, which takes on the significance of being the oldest home in Aurora. But the deed house was built by Ebenezer Sheldon and his family probably around the year 1805, and was used as a land agent's office. Ebenezer Sheldon was the land agent for a group of investors that called themselves the Big Beaver and Cuyahoga Land Company. They were a group of men who had entered into a lottery that was established back in 1895 by 3 Connecticut legislators that had been put in charge of determining what would happen with the 4 million acres that made up the Connecticut Western Reserve. They bid on a section of some 80,000 acres. The group of 30 men spent probably $52,000 as their investment. And as a result, a smaller group ended up with the township of Aurora and Manaway and some acreage down in Warren, and that was Sheldon's responsibility to be able to come out here and make sure that that land was surveyed, and then eventually sold it off to other pioneers who decided to move to the area of Aurora. Ebenezer Sheldon was born in 1854 in Suffield, Connecticut, and that's where most of the investors and early pioneers from Aurora came from. At 1754, when he was born, it was the beginning of the French and Indian War. He was 6 years old when that war came to an end, finally settled the dispute between the British and the French over the lands west of the Appalachian River. He continued to live in Suffield, Connecticut, and when he was 16, the Boston Massacre occurred, which kind of riled up his feelings about where he stood as a patriot. He will later join the Minutemen from Suffield, Connecticut, and in 1775, when the Battle of Lexington and Concord takes place, he will answer the Lexington alarm. The alarm went out for Minutemen from around New England to merge on Boston, and surround the British there, eventually causing them to evacuate the city of Boston and moving to New York City, where there were a lot of loyalists. He continued with those 51 men. I think he spent a total of only 18 days there. Went back because a lot of them eventually go back because they are still farmers and they have to tend to the farm. He will later join, though, the Connecticut militia as a captain in the 9th Regiment during the American Revolution. There were a lot of probably different things that motivated Ebenezer to give up his comfortable home in Suffield, Connecticut. Following the American Revolution, there was an economic downturn in the economy in New England. A lot of the farmland had been kind of exhausted, and it was not the kind of cultivated land that was turning out great crops. And unable to detect the exact reasons, there was something going on in the Sheldon family that was probably some business setbacks that caused him then to up his stakes and sell the family, most of the family estate back in Suffield, and move here for a fresh start. Again, he was the only investor out of the 30 investors, though, that actually made the move to Aurora. There were two routes primarily that the pioneers to Aurora and to the Western Reserve took. One would take them up the Hudson River, across upper state New York, over to Lake Ontario, and then down Lake Erie. Ebenezer selected to go the southern route, started off a little bit later in the spring, and followed a route that basically follows the today's Pennsylvania Turnpike to Pittsburgh, and then up Indian trails from Pittsburgh to Warren, and eventually into Manaway. The move has actually been in the planning stages probably for almost 2 years now. When the city purchased the Spring Hill farm some 6 or 7 years ago, there was a lot of discussion on what to do with the property, but Historical Society right from the beginning had its eyes sighted on the deed house, and thought that it would be a great place for the Aurora Historical Society to get involved in. When the Ohio EPA and the Chagrin Water Conservatory kind of took over and pretty much dictated what we could and could not do with Spring Hill, I think the determination then was to move that deed house to a central location in the city where it would be open to the community and the public. So the Historical Society, we plan to use that as a visitor center, historic visitor center. One of the big problems we have as a historical society is getting people to know that our museum is in the basement of the library, and we believe that this is going to be a means of being able to attract people to the museum. The visitor center will have an interpretive display about the Sheldon experience here in Aurora, along with the early pioneers. We plan to have 3 different walking tours, one of the Central Historic District, one of the train station district, and then of the Aurora Cemetery. So visitors to Aurora, the community and citizens themselves, can start their venture through Aurora's history by coming to the deed house, learning a little bit about the early history, coming to the museum, learning more about Aurora's history, and then taking part in either one or all 3 of the historic walks.
Currently on display at the Aurora Historical Society Museum, the Ebenezer Sheldon Experience. This exhibit tells the story of the early history of the Connecticut Western Reserve and the life of Ebenezer Sheldon, the first settler to what is now Aurora, Ohio. For exhibit times and Historical Society info, please log on to aurorahistorical.org.